folks. I'm thrilled to welcome Anu Singh Choudhary. Anu, I have never met her. It is actually quite a story how we landed up connecting, because somebody who works for her came as a non-participant along with a participant for one of my workshops. And then we hit it off, and then we started chatting. And then for 4 years, I've been looking for somebody to teach script writing at the Himalayan Writing. And we've had 2-3 close misses, but somehow it just never worked out. And then she said, I work for this company, Dopamine Media. And my boss is this lady called Anu Singh Choudhary, and she's an awesome script writer. And so one thing led to another, and now here we are. So Anu was actually going to be at the retreat. Yeah, and so she is actually going to be at the retreat on the 28th.
23rd to 28th.
23rd to 28th. No, 23rd to 27th.
27th, yeah.
Yeah, so she will be, 24th to 27th.
So I am also counting my travel days.
Yeah.
20, yeah.
In May, she'll be there, and she'll be teaching a course on script writing, screenwriting. But she's here today to talk about screenwriting and also to talk about Hindi books and writing in Hindi, because we have some people here who write in Hindi. There's, of course, a lot of interest in script writing. And in fact, that course is getting lots of action, lots of forms. But I'll just give you a quick formal introduction. So Anu Singh Choudhary is a celebrated author in Hindi and is an accomplished screenwriter. Her experience as a documentary filmmaker and award-winning journalist makes her stories an authentic chronicle of the zeitgeist. Anu has written extensively across mediums: print, radio, TV, films, and digital. As a screenwriter, Anu has written Arya seasons 1 and 2. She has also co-written the critically acclaimed Disney Plus Hotstar series Grahan, inspired by a Hindi novel Chaurasi. She has written a Hindi screenplay adaptation of the Malayalam masterpiece The Great Indian Kitchen, and has adapted 2 Bengali films into Hindi. As the co-founder of Dopamine Media, Anu has written and directed The Good Girl Show, a 5-part series for YouTube, and has co-produced Alma Matters Inside the IIT Dream, a 3-part docuseries streaming on Netflix. She is the author of the best-selling Hindi books Neela Scarf, that is this one that I'm reading about, Mamma Ki Diary, Bhali Ladkiyan, Buri Ladkiyan. She has translated well-known authors, including Perumal Murugan, who is up for the International Booker this year. He's on the long list. Namita Gokhale, Paulo Coelho, Veer Sanghvi, and Anuja Chauhan into Hindi. Anu started her career in journalism with NDTV. She has been awarded the Ramnath Goenka Award for Excellence in Journalism and the Ladli Media and Advertising Awards for her stories in Owen Connection. So that's a interesting, very interesting.
Actually, Gaon Connection. That's
Gaon Connection? Sorry, my fault. Goan Connection. हमारे यहाँ गोवा के बहुत लोग आते हैं, so that's my fault. All right, so thrilled to have you on. Thank you so much for making the time. This is so cool.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so this was the formal introduction. But before we dive into my questions, tell us a little bit about the journey. I mean, where did you start, and then how did Hindi writing and books happen, and then how come script writing? So what was that whole? It'll help everybody get to know you a little bit better, just to kind of get your background.
Sure, no, that helps. Stream of consciousness answer to that particular question, because I also sometimes wonder where it started and where I have come. It has been such a long journey. I am actually originally from Bihar. Where I was born in a very small place called Siwan. And I was raised in Ranchi, and Hindi just happened to be, I went to a Hindi medium school. That's what, and I was raised in a very patriarchal setup where boys went to English medium schools and girls were sent to Hindi medium schools, because, matric karo, inter karo, fir shaadi ho jayegi. So, so I remember once when I was in grade 8, I had hunger strike. I had decided to not eat something till they changed my school to an English medium one. And when my great grandfather said, it was a joint family, and the great grandfather then was still like sort of at the helm of things. So he said that acha hai, hamara khana baj raha hai. He sort of joked. And I said that I'll do thos hadkal now. I'll keep eating till you do not change. Then unfortunately that didn't happen. So I continued to. But what it did was that, because I was just so I had the hunger to learn the language. So whatever my brothers were studying, their course books, everything else. So I was actually not just studying in Hindi, but I was also coming back and looking at their books. So I was actually working twice as somebody my age, and I was learning both the languages. I managed to go to an English medium school eventually for my high school. Not that it mattered much. By the time I had anyway learned the language and was fairly good in literature, both English and Hindi literature. I had started to write for school magazines, for various local newspapers. I was also, just purely out of curiosity that what does it feel like to engage with the larger audience, to have a voice. So purely out of that curiosity, I started to go to the radio station to narrate my poems. I started to write for local newspapers, both Hindi and English. So that was probably the first seed of realizing that having your name in print as byline is a very thrilling experience. And it happened at the age of 13, 14. So in my head, I always knew that, okay, writing is something that I want to do, but I didn't know the path to it, which is why after college, I studied humanities, literature and history and political science. And after college, when everybody else was looking at other career options, I decided to do journalism because to my mind, it seemed like the only way to be a writer. Like that's what's the only thing that you're doing, right? As a reporter, you're going, collecting stories, coming back and reporting. So you're constantly writing. So that's how I did my course in journalism. But something happened then. And it was a milestone kind of thing. I was in Indian Institute of Mass Communication doing my journalism from there. And there used to be a very boring teacher. I will not name him because this is a very small world. But his classes used to be so boring that I would sit on the back bench and I would just voraciously read. That was the year when I read a lot. And I ended up reading Surendra Verma's Mujhe Chand Chahiye. And I don't know what happened. Varsha, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this novel, but it's the story of a small town girl who finds her expression through theater and eventually lands up in Bombay and starts working as an art house actor and then makes it big. So that was so fascinating. That was really genuinely fascinated by the world of NST, the world of acting, the world of theater, the world of creation, the world of cinema. And that was probably the time I realized that it was good fun to just see what it's like. Look at the power of cinema. We have all grown up. All we remember is are the dialogues. Like if we had to say something, the dialogues just come very naturally to us. We say things through songs, and the kind of influence that the Hindi cinema has on our lives in general, and I'm sure other parts of the country also, all the world also. If you were to be a writer, this was the medium.
Right.
So after IMC, while everybody else, this was the year 2000 when satellite channels were opening up. The entire batch was placed because all the new channels were opening up, but they were taking people in. So it was the golden year to be a journalist. Every single person had got placed from our batch because there was so much demand. I actually did not take any of that, and I came to Bombay looking for some sort of a break. I wanted to learn production. I wanted to learn something about cinema, but I had no clue how to do it. I did not have a single relative. I didn't have anybody. I didn't know anybody. I just landed up here, and it's crazy that I was staying in Andheri in Oshiwara with a relative, and I had come down. So, I'd reached in the morning, I was reading the newspaper, Bombay Times, some news piece had said, so-and-so is making a film, that so-and-so happened to be Deepak Tijori. So it's just like, you have this in information. We used to come down, that was not the time of mobile phones. Mobile phones were not easily available. So I would come down to make calls from PCO. I got down, and then I see Deepak Tijori walking into his office or wherever he's walking. Like a fool, like a 21-year-old fool, I just walk up to him and I say that, hello, sir, I read that you are starting your new film and I want to learn production. He just looked at me. And then he just didn't know how to react. And then he just called his production manager, hey, Satish, isko bata do kya karne ka hai? And he walks off. And the production manager just looks at me, ki tumko kya aata hai? I said, kuch nahi, sir, par seekh lenge. So then... like, अच्छा ठीक है, कल पहुंचो RA colony, देखते हैं पहुंच पाती हो कि नहीं. But I did actually genuinely land up in RA colony in a studio the next day, and that's how it started. And it was a very small chota budget ka film, but there were other TV things that he was doing. And from being a production assistant, my job was actually to call people to have breakfast, to have to give call, to have prepare the call sheets and tell everybody on phone or otherwise what your call time is for the next day. Prepare a list of requirements as to what would be required for production the next day. So all of that, it was very clerical. There's nothing creative about it. And yet just the joy of being in the set was exhilarating enough for me to continue to do it for 8 months, 9 months. And then the film released. And the film was called Oops.
Okay.
Which is the story of a male stripper who falls in love with his best friend's mother. So, and it released nationwide. And my parents freaked out. This is like, 2001 ka Bihar, Jharkhand mein bana nahi tha. And they just didn't know how to react because ab kisko kya bataye ki hamari beti kya kar rahi hai. So I was given the ultimatum, chup chap wapas aao. I had to abandon my Bombay dreams like that. And at that time, I just sort of started to, Deepak had enough confidence in me to start giving me scripts to read, to, sort of give feedback, to prepare presentations. So I was slowly getting to the creative side of it. Yes, it was a bad film, but there was so much to learn. And at least I was getting to see filmmaking up and close. But anyway, fate was not to have it. I went back, and that's how, after a couple of months, I realized that abhi Bombay to nahi aa sakte. And I remember my brother with whom I run Dopamine, he's also been my partner in crime. In 2001, he had traveled to Bombay all the way from IIT Kharagpur to tell me that, Didi, just go back. Delhi is a safe space. You don't know anybody in Bombay. People are freaking out. Our family is freaking out. I promise we'll come back here 10 years later and we'll figure our way out. But abhi to hum nahi kar sakte. Film mein nahi bana sakte. Fairly so 19, 21 saal ke log kya hi kar lenge. So that's how I joined NDTV. And while I was there, NDTV was really, I had thought that it would be a place where I would retire from. It was a very, very safe environment. The team was excellent. They were just setting up. It was breaking away from, I joined just before they were turning, like NDTV was going national as an NDTV channel. So there's so much to learn. I was probably the youngest on the desk and as a reporter. So it just worked very well. So 5 years of journalism, actually TV journalism, were also the best years of my life. But then while I was doing that, I got married and I had twins. So, I had to take a maternity break. So life kept coming into the way. And life is the one who kept telling me that, boss, ho gaya abhi, now change your direction, do something else. So because I had 2 little children to take care of, I had to be flexible in my work, which is how I started making documentaries. I started writing scripts for documentaries. When the children started to grow up, I started writing in order to express my postpartum, probably. I started to write these anecdotes, which started to get published as blog posts or columns and stuff. And then that's how Mama Ki Diary happened. I was also writing short stories. So one thing led to the other. It was completely unplanned. And by 2014, by which time I was a fairly decent freelancer, working at all sorts of costs that were available then in Delhi, really hustling, struggling, sometimes translating, sometimes editing, sometimes writing, sometimes also filmmaking, editing, doing post-production for people, basically just hustling. That hustle turned me into a writer. And that was also the time when I started to figure out that, okay, what is the story that I want to tell? So that's how Neela Scarf came into being. And then one particular incident that had happened in Delhi led to Bhali Ladkiyan, Buri Ladkiyan. Actually, first to the Good Girl Show, which was a 5-part YouTube series. And I realized that I've not been able to say enough. So then it was adapted into a novel. So this was really just unplanned. And just last anecdote as to how I became a screenwriter. So 2017, 2018, 2016, 2017, all of us from Delhi had started to feel that this pollution is not doing us any good and we need to make some tough choices. My children, both of them, especially my son, had a very weak, like he used to get a lot of bronchial problems. So we started to feel that we'll have to move out and to move towards the hills. And because Gangtok happened to be closer to where my husband is from, so we decided that we moved to Gangtok, and that's how we moved to Gangtok. And while I was writing there, and then they started to study in a boarding school. So once I was going to actually see them off, it's quite a dramatic one. All of us were in the gadi, and then it started to rain, and suddenly some landslide happened, and a huge boulder came crashing on the car that we were in. Although it was a bigger car, so which is why we probably got saved, and purely because of the astute driver who was on the steering wheel. But that accident happened, we were safe. But the first thing that came to my mind was, shit, I would have died without writing a film. I don't want to die without writing a film. And that, I mean, it was, and then you know how emotions of guilt, emotions of a lot of like that, our life was at stake. And I'm thinking about why I have not written a film or something. I mean, I should have been a screenwriter, or I should have made my own film. That made me realize that there is something which is very, very deep. It's coming from not just this fancy passion of screenwriting. It's far deeper than that, and it's coming from the core desire. And that's how I actually came to Bombay, really without any job, without any assignment, without any project. But thankfully, by then I had made some sort of there was a lot of credibility in the sense that as an author, I had done journalists who had moved on and had become fiction writers. They knew me. So one thing that led to the other, and I got the gig of Arya, which was I first got the gig of Grahan because Satya and I are contemporary writers. Our publishers the same. I'm a great fan of his writing, and I really thought Charasi had the potential. Thankfully, it was picked up by the right person to adapt. So then Grahan happened, and then Arya happened, and ever since then I have not looked back. So, well, that was the long and short of it all. Sorry about it's going on.
It's always fascinating to hear stories. And you have quite a few very interesting stories. So I think that's more fun than the introduction that I had given. So my next question was really about language, because you're very adept in English, and your writing is all in Hindi. So Neela Scarf became the blue scarf, which is what I've read a little bit of. And and I noticed the same thing about Gitanjali Sri also. She's very good in Hindi and she's equally good in English. Yet you've got Kamaini to do the translation for you. She had Daisy Rockwell to do the translation for her. So why are you not doing the English writing as well yourself when clearly you can? Is there a reason?
Translation is a form of art in itself. It's not just about translating, it's about transcreating. And you need to have the zoom out feel to it. And you need to look at your own material very differently and very objectively. The thing is that if we were to translate our own work, we come into our way. So I did actually, to be honest, I tried translating one of the stories and it didn't work. I hated it. So so why I write in Hindi is simple. It's just that Hindi is my first language, just comes very naturally to me. So it's just, you enjoy more, or you are your candid self, or you are in your truest form when you're writing in the language that you know and love and genuinely feel passionate about. I feel the same way for my language. Whereas English it's a beautiful language in its own right, and there is so much but I don't think I have the expertise, or I have the language skills to say the same thing that I could say very lucidly, for the lack of a better word, or vividly in Hindi and than in English. It's not like I don't write in English. I do. Right. But I don't translate because, you can't be, and you have to free the material that you have created in one language. You have to free it from the burden of being the same level of what you have created. So I guess that's the reason why a lot of writers who are bilingual, multilingual choose to have other people translate them. And it's a joy. Right. It's such a process because, Kamaini and I were actually constantly interacting because she would have a lot of questions and we would just to be able to see that somebody was, what I had written, I had forgotten, and to have somebody else look at it so differently and ask some very profound and yet very basic questions about a certain sentence or a certain emotion or a character, that helps you look at your own material very differently. So I am very grateful that this was translated by somebody else.
Cool. So now, I have this hypothesis, and I could be completely wrong, but I have this hypothesis that, say 5 or 7 years ago, really before the arrival of OTT in any meaningful way, Hindi writing was not an easy space, right? And people wrote out of passion. People wrote, not that English writing is easy, but I'm just saying Hindi writing was probably even harder, right? But the arrival of OTT has really opened up a new gate, a new doorway for a lot of Hindi writers, because suddenly it's almost like a leapfrog over English, because English writers aren't necessarily as valued and as functional in the script writing space as Hindi writers are. So when I look at somebody like you, or I look at somebody like Divya Prakash Dubey, who teaches that Hindi writing course, you guys are really having a great time, and there's a lot of value, and there's a lot of work that's coming your way in the script writing space. So do you think this is a good time to be getting into this whole screenwriting, script writing area? Or do you think this is, it sounds from the outside, I don't know enough, but it sounds like it's really hot. It's really happening right now. Is that how it looks like from the inside as well?
It is. OTT has actually also opened the gates to a lot of opportunities. So not just for Hindi writers, but also otherwise. But we'll come to that later. There was this golden phase in Hindi cinema also way back in 1670s, or probably earlier, when Manto or an Ismat Chuttai were writing. Ismat Chuttai was also a director. She directed a couple of films as well, and she used to write the scripts for her husband who was a director. So it was only natural that because they knew the language so well, it was only natural that they would learn the language of the cinema or create something in the language of the cinema. That continued, that a tradition continued even as Kamleshwar or Rahi Masoon Raza started to write. And it's just so amazing that somebody like a Rahi Masoon Raza Saab, who was also writing Adha Gaon, was also writing good answer. Or a Kamleshwar who was writing Kitne Pakistan, was Southern ki and look up to these. And then there's this. So I was actually very, very curious about very, very curious about how Hindi writers medium of cinema came now Kumar Singh, so many of these Hindi authors, which is it's an intervention has to be given people in English, and other things happen in English, and you were often just called to do, like, I had to stop I had to start saying no to people who just come to me for Hindi dialogues. So, and then I started to say that I'm not just a Hindi dialogue writer. What do you mean by Hindi dialogue? I'm not here to translate your work. So what people do is they do placeholder dialogues, and they expect you as a Hindi writer to just translate their thoughts. We're not here to do that. There's a reason why the Hindi writers have some sort of a connect to the audiences. They know, they have their ears to the ground. They have the experience. They have the stories to tell. Please honor those stories. So while from the outside, it seems like it's a mine of opportunities, we are still struggling and fighting for equal credits, and there are caucuses that you're trying to break into. A lot of us have been very, very lucky, and a lot of us are helping each other, and a lot of us are still struggling, and they are figuring their way out. But yes. I see that in the next few years, we are only going to get stronger. And I often joke, in fact, when PS1 had released Divya's film, I said that you wait and watch like 5 years, and there'll be this whole generation of Hindi writers who've been published mostly by Hindians will find their voices in the cinema also. So that's what is happening. Having said that, we still have a long way to go, and we still have to keep pushing our way through it.
But still, it's great to know that there is growth and then there is opportunity. While there is no such thing as a perfect world, but at least there is there is some good action that's happening there. So I'm going to open it up to questions from everyone. So folks, shoot your questions into the chat, because we are already at 5:30. But while we're waiting for that, I had one question. I mean, clearly you love your work. But do you love deadlines? I mean, how does that relationship with deadlines go when you have something that you need to finish and you want to get it right versus you have to deliver it on Tuesday?
you will not function without deadlines. So no writer does.
Okay.
So we must learn to honor. However, deadlines also play havoc with us, and we also have a very complicated, toxic relationships with deadlines. So we negotiate with each other and we sort of make way for each other. There are times when you want to spend more time on what you're writing, especially it's about scene creation. So then you ask the deadline to just be a little gentle on you. Otherwise, you let the deadline take over, because then it is getting the work done from you. So yeah, it's a give and take. It's a lot of negotiation, constant, like perpetual negotiation with deadlines.
First question is from Nishant. He's saying, do share your writing routine.
There is the only routine that I follow is that I try to write at least something, one scene, or just open the final draft software on which I'm working, definitely in the morning. So it sets the day in motion in a way where you know that you have set your goals. So because I'm a commercial writer and because I write in different formats, and I'm simultaneously when I'm working on a script, sometimes you're working on a couple of scripts, sometimes you're also part of, just screenwriting is also a lot of collaborative writing.
Right.
You have writers' rooms and you have your directors that you're constantly interacting with. So it's not just about writing, but it's also about writing, going to the writer's room, pitching your writing, pitching your ideas, discussing your scenes, discussing your dialogues with them, and then the whole process of feedback, which is one form of writing that I do. The other form, the writing that I do in the form of which we'll hopefully see the form of another book, is more isolating, is more in solitude. So the writing routines for both of them differ. But these are the two things that I definitely do. That one, set the day in motion by just opening the blank page or whatever you're working on. So you know what. And the second thing that I try to do is set small goals. That, okay, today I have to write these 5 scenes. Today I have to rework on the draft that I was working on 3 days ago. Today I have to work on that particular episode. So that these are the only two routines that I follow. Otherwise, the day becomes, you have to be very, very flexible, because like I said, I'm not a master of my own time as a screenwriter. I am, in fact, I have to serve and honor the deadline. I have to serve and honor the writer's room. I have to serve and honor platforms, producers. There are various stakeholders who will eventually come in to take the script from you and build on what they have to build. So yeah, you have to keep that thing also in mind. And the two things that I try to do in terms of life skill. So one is routine. So these are the two basic routines that I follow. The life skills that I try to remind myself of and try to keep imbibing in, bringing it back to myself again and again, is collaboration and flexibility. So, yeah.
So next question is, Nandita loves the Great Indian Kitchen. And so she said she'd love to hear a little bit about your time working on that.
Yeah, so unfortunately, as writers, we also are bound by NDA, which is non-disclosure agreement. So I can't reveal much, except the fact that the film is ready. It's in post-production, and you will soon see the hopefully the teaser. So the film will be releasing this summer. However, as a process, when the film came to me, when I was asked to, if I was asked if I would be interested in doing it, I was a little, I loved the film myself, but I was also uncertain that how do you make something which is anyway a masterpiece? How do you recreate something which is a masterpiece in itself? And that's when you begin to realize that you have to relook at, so in an adaptation, you have to actually figure out what you want to say, how you define your characters, how do you see that story, and how do you basically contextualize it. So that was the main job that was assigned to me, that you have to make it contextual to the North Indian family setup, to the versions of patriarchy that we see in North Indian families. So just basic, simple difference that, I'll give you one example. Malayalam cinema it relies heavily on silences and stoicism. Stoic. You see the film, And not just this film, but otherwise, except like Fahad's expressions, stoic expressions speak a lot. If you look at his films, even in Great Indian Kitchen, Nimisha doesn't say much. It's her expression. But here is a Sanya who's playing that character, who's a very different person. So how do we bring in the North Indian girl in her and marry it with her personality, which is vivacious, which is very sweet, which is very innocent? And how do we add that to the character and do the same retelling in a way where it stays true to the core and yet feels like a different film? It cannot be your scene by scene copy. So it's not a scene by scene copy. While the tent poles of the film remain, the tenets of the film remain, it is it is adaptation, it is contextualizing, which means that there is more dialogue baji, one-liners more, because we love to talk a lot as North Indians. So, integrating that. So these are small little things that we did. And it took us about a year and a half to work on the script while the pre-prod was going on. So that is how much time it takes, even when you are adapting.
Okay, we already have almost 10 new questions and we have about 15 minutes left. So you can see if you want to take some of the questions, if you feel you've answered them already, you can skip them. So the next question is, do you think in Hindi? I think you already said that you did. And so if so, how does that work while you write in English, especially those little things that has no words in English? How do you manage those moments?
I just keep it to the natural language. And also, I just wanted to add here that Neela Scarf actually dropped 2 stories. The Blue Scarf, the translation dropped 2 stories from Neela Scarf. There was one story which is Bisesar Bhukhi Premika, and the other one's Mukti. Bisesar Bhukhi Premika has very heavy. I come from Siwan, and Bhojpuri is my first language. So there were a lot of language nuances to the story. And we did at some point realize that there's no point in translating it. So you leave it as is.
Yeah.
So you just have to try multiple permutations and combinations and see what's working for that particular piece of translation that you're working on. But I believe in just letting the original be sometimes in terms of words, in terms of nuances, phrases.
In fact, even in Blue Scarf, the first look, there's a lot of folk songs and there's a lot of, and I felt the loss. I felt I can understand Hindi and I can read it. I felt it is a compromise. It felt like a compromise. In fact, I wanted to then go and look at the Hindi version and maybe get the Hindi one to understand some of those nuances. Anyway, we move to the next question. So how often do you have to do the dialogues based on characters and based on the actors playing these characters? Does that happen?
Always. It's a give and take process, like I said. So you cannot separate the dialogues from the character. The dialogues are a reflection. They are the manifestation of what your character is. So characterization and dialogue writing happens hand in hand. That's a separate matter. Now, when an actor comes in, an artist comes in, he or she brings in his or her own improvisation skills or understanding or nuances. So then that allows to, tweak it, that allows it to. So, but I'll give you an example of Arya. Till the entire season was written, we didn't know that Sushmita Sen was going to play it.
Okay.
But when we knew that Sushmita Sen was playing it, so when we were writing season 2, for example, or now season 3, we very naturally, because we know how she will play it and we know now the characters, how they play it. So we use that to our advantage in dialogue writing also. So yeah, you have to be, screenwriting cannot happen in isolation. It's very collaborative, and you cannot separate the writer from the director, from the actor, from even the DOP sometimes as to how the DOP is seeing that. So what you create as a screenwriter is actually the roadmap for your cast and crew. So that is how important your work is.
Cool. So there's a next question. Thank you for that. That's interesting. The next question was, what do you do when you get writer's block? And I have a follow-up question, which is, can you afford to get writer's block?
No, unfortunately, no, not.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is no, I move on and work on something else. I sleep through the writer's block and wake up and try to, but yeah, there is no time for writer's block now. In the last 5 years, ever since I've been a screenwriter, I wish I had the luxury of just okay, nothing's coming to me and I'm going to take long walks and I'm going to go for long swims, but Unfortunately not. So yeah,
And not in the life of a scriptwriter, I'm sure.
no.
All right, cool. The next question is, when you develop a story idea? This is from Anshuman. Hi, Anshuman. When you develop a story idea, how do you string in the seasonal arc? Or does this process depend on other stakeholders like the director, producer, and platform? And how does one change a film to a web show format without losing the essence of it?
But there is a very famous saying by Aaron Sorkins that if it's a character, it's about a character's journey. No, sorry. If it's an event, it's a film. If it's a character journey, it's a series. So that's if you can see through the multiple characters. So series is a complicated. So it's 90 minutes versus 300 minutes, 350 minutes, 400 minutes. So you see the expansion that you need to do. So not all films can be made into series.
Yeah.
There are multiple arcs and there are multiple there. It has to have some sort of character journey going on and on and on, or have the potential. So yes, there are some films which can be turned into a series, but it really depends on how you see the arc of the character in that particular story. And if you're convinced about this being a longer journey. So time limit wise is in 90 minutes versus 300 minutes. Now, the second question is that how do you give the seasonal arc and other always the other stakeholders are always involved. Yes, you do write in isolation, as in, sometimes you're the single writer, sometimes there are 2-3 more writers, and we develop it together. And there is a lovely process where you actually start to get into the room and you start to talk through the characters. Then when you begin to talk about the characters, automatically in your discussions, arcs begin to appear. When the arcs begin to appear, you begin to look at the plot. When the plots begin to appear, you start thinking of scene construction and interweaving of the character arcs. And it's a long going process. Sometimes just to prepare the seasonal arc for a series takes about 6 to 8 months. And that's a minimum that it takes to write. Even if you're doing it you can't do it every day. You can't do it. It gets very exhausting. So even if you're doing 3 days a week, because you need to go back and keep tweaking what you are thinking and keep writing it. I had once, I remember in Shonda Rhimes' masterclass, I had once heard that she writes 10,000 pages in order to get to the 50 pages of the script that will eventually make as the episode of Grey's Anatomy. So that's the kind of reams and reams of paper, like really without any exaggeration. So for 80 pages, you have actually written probably sometimes 800 pages and you only keep 10%. So it's a lot of writing and just, but thankfully, because it happens in collaboration, it doesn't feel daunting. And not everybody can be a screenwriter. It's actually strangely temperamental also. So then you choose that, okay, I will only do dialogues, or I will only hand over my story and I will not get into screenplay writing. So that's these are the choices that you have to make basis. How much do you want to collaborate? What your temperament is like? And it really is individual to individual. There is no set answer to that.
Right. Okay, cool. In fact, they say the same thing about short stories as well. Is that short stories are about events, but novels are about characters. So it's kind of the same.
Yeah.
I don't know who said that, but yeah. Okay, Mridu has the next question. Any tips for writing dialogue, especially for scenes with multiple characters? How do you ensure that you're able to maintain unique identities of each character while writing such scenes?
A very simple exercise that I always do, that if you've written a scene and there are, say, 6 characters or 7 characters, you see the scene, you write this first draft of the scene as to what the mudda of the scene is going to be. Like, what do you want to tell? How do you take the plot further or emotion further? What's happening in the scene? So from that point of view, you write for each dialogue, for each character. Then you stop and then you begin to look at the same scene from every character's point of view. So like there are 5 characters. Now I'm writing as Anu. So Anu's tone and whatever will begin to reflect. But then I now look at the same scene, even if Chetan's character is saying only 2 dialogues, I will look at it from Chetan's point of view to see what is happening to Chetan in that particular scene. What is he feeling? What will he say? So that exercise really helps. And sometimes that exercise not just helps in the scene writing and dialogue writing, but also larger perspective of the story. Like if you've done the script, if you begin to read it twice or thrice, if you read it from two or three point of views, no, a lot of new revelations begin to happen through the characters. I don't know if it'll sound like a voodoo, it'll sound like magical, but it's mysterious how characters begin to show themselves on paper and actually begin to have their own identity. But you have to be present with them. You have to allow them to speak. If you're focused only on one character, the other characters will not find their voice. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, that's great. I think we got an idea. Next question is from Michelle.
The same thing happens not just for screenplay, it also happens for novels. So you have to look at the same scene from different characters' point of view, and especially for key scenes. And, tweak it accordingly, because then that gives you a different idea, sometimes even the protagonist. For the protagonist, right, which you can use to your advantage. Yeah, sorry.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was reading out the next question. So how can you use your screenwriting skills to change the narrative from the North Indian patriarchal society for stronger female role models, given your own story of breaking the mold?
Great Indian Kitchen writing was joy. I mean, it was coming from my gut. I just knew these characters. So even the dialogues, even the scenes, there was so much resonance. I used to laugh about it. I used to tell my director that when my family sees it, they're going to chase me down to hell. Because I've just taken, like sometimes even their quirks, I've just picked it up and have kept it like that. And of course, it had to be a role model in a way where it felt liberating after watching the film. And there's this very simple equation that works for screenwriting. Cinema is E square I. So, entertainment, emotion, and inspiration. So if you remember this, that, okay, am I getting these three things going into my script, into my story? You may fail sometimes, but if you're cognizant of the fact that these are the three things that need to come out in scenes, in dialogues, you're sorted. So that's what I was also doing for the Great Indian Kitchen. And yes, it had to inspire. The role models had to, especially the protagonist's life, had to in some way inspire us. So she had to be more vivacious and more brave in that sense, which hopefully you will see. And hopefully you will be able to recognize.
Right. We have still quite a few questions pending. I'm going to choose one and I'm going to close with that. I think it's a very interesting question. That is from Gaurav Gandhi. He's saying, how did Alma Matters happen? How do you pick up the actual characters for this series and get access to prestigious institutes like IIT Kharagpur, where there was a mention of a sensitive topic like suicide on the campus?
Yeah.
We'll close with that question and then we'll move to.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. Thank you for asking that. So Alma Matters is hopefully an IP that we want. We've kept the IP with us, and it's not just IIT that we want to do. We also want to go to other premier institutions. The idea was actually looking at the legacy institutions and figuring out how they change the lives of youth generations after generations. And so it started with that premise as to, what makes an institution a legacy institution. Why is IIT different from other engineering colleges? What is so special about IIM? What is FTII all about? So we went to actually a lot of these legacy institutions. IIT happened purely because of the reason that the entire crew they were from IIT Kharagpur. So they were all graduates from IIT Kharagpur, starting from 2005 batch to, in fact, till about 2018-19 batch. So the camera person, the director, the graphic designer, the editor, the music person, all of them, the graphic art. I was only enabling. My job as a producer was to make sure that the conversations happening with the authorities were happening in a way where they did not feel threatened or violated. And this was also being done just before the pandemic and also during the pandemic. So there was a lot of trust building exercise that went into it. And the crew would actually go and live on the campus for days and days at length to get the confidence, to let them be. And that's when they began to have that confidence where the subjects started to share their story without being worried about the presence of the camera, but it took us 3 years to get to that stage. So documentary filmmaking actually is a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of trust building exercise. There is a set protocol that we follow, good practices, where how we interview the subjects, when to let the camera do the role, when to stop, when to let the emotions flow, how to build trust with the subjects. So the one thing that we do is we don't make it rush thing. It can't be a TV thing where, अरे हमारे पास इतना ही time है, जल्दी से करके निकल जाओ. नहीं, you have to stay with the characters and let them tell the most candid and sometimes, speak their fears. So there's a simple practice that we follow, that we are doing also for the next documentary series that we are working on. So yeah, it's a lot of trust building exercise, and hopefully we will see other institutions also, but it's a tough one because of what, like you said, there are sensitive topics, and then there were so many conversations that happened around that, around suicide, around caste discrimination that happens there. So a lot of institutions actually did get sort of apprehensive about our presence. So some of those conversations stalled, but we're hopeful that we'll get to a point. I mean, we have 20 years of storytelling. So at some point I'll be able to convince NSD, FTII and other legacy institutions to let us tell the story of their campuses as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. It's been awesome. I wish we could ask and we have this session go on for longer, but unfortunately that option is not available.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. It was so wonderful to be here. Thank you. All the best, guys. All the best to everybody. Keep writing.
Thank you.